Humblemud.
Hey everyone, I hope you had a fantastic holiday. I'm finally back after being sick over the holidays myself, and while I've not quite fully recovered yet, I've been itching to get back on some videos, so let's do this. I played a lot of fantastic games in 2024, around 80 of them in fact, and of those 80-ish games, I've beaten 27. Today, I wanted to cover my top 10 favorite games I played over 2024, as well as shout out a big handful of honorable mentions since I had some extra time to think about this. Now, I have a lot to cover, so I want to jump in as soon as possible, but just to clarify some things first. Number one, this list only considers games I played for the first time, so ones like these that I played before as a kid but didn't beat until now unfortunately weren't included. Number two, these are my favorite games I played this year, regardless of the year that these games actually came out. Three, I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, so a lot of footage will likely be from earlier parts of the games I cover. And four, remember this is just my own opinion and it's all for fun. Deciding on how I would rank these games was quite difficult, but ultimately I settled on ranking them based on how much they resonated with me, how much fun I had, how much I continue to think about them to this day, and how they intertwine with my life at the time that I played them. All in all, the margins between each spot on this list are so thin because I genuinely loved all of these games so much. I hope to see you all in the comments sharing your favorite games that you played last year. Let me know if you'd like to hear me talk more in depth about any of the games I'm about to mention. And now, without further ado, let's jump into the top 10. For number 10, we have Golden Sun. As you may know from my spoiler-free, in-depth review I did of the game, I had a couple issues with it, but overall, I came out the other side with a lot of fond memories and thoughts, and I was truly grateful that I finally got to experience the game. I think Golden Sun's world setting and lore are top-notch, the music is among the best I've heard in recent memory, and the puzzles really challenged me in some places. Camelot, the developers of this game, set out to make a Nintendo RPG that could compete with the PlayStation RPGs that were reigning supreme at the time, and I think Golden Sun was a considerably solid effort that ultimately achieved that. To me, it feels somewhere between a classic SNES and PS1 RPG, and it really pushed the boundaries of what the Game Boy Advance was able to do. I share a lot more of my thoughts about Golden Sun in my dedicated review that I just put out, so I don't really want to repeat myself, but just know that I ended up ranking this game only below Final Fantasy Tactics Advance when it comes to my favorite GBA games of all time. It's a classic for a reason, and I'm so glad this ended up being the JRPG that you all chose for me to play last year. Definitely watch my review after this though if you'd like to see my in-depth thoughts on the game. Number 9, Granblue Fantasy Relink. This is hands down the most beautiful JRPG I think I've ever played in my life from a visual standpoint, and I simply love the music and world setting. You're thrust into the middle of this long-running friendship between a big band of merry adventurers, but I never really felt like I was lost. I think the game does a good job of making you care for this group even though you're jumping onto this train, or airship I guess, midway. Granblue was also an important game to me because it was the first new game I played after my brother passed away. Coincidentally, one of the main characters, Roland, looks remarkably like my brother, and so I sort of felt like I was playing that game with him. I owe a lot to Granblue for inspiring happiness, awe, laughter, and determination in me, and for just giving my life some color during a time that was otherwise very depressing and gray. Unfortunately, the main campaign of this game is quite short considering how grandiose the scale of it may appear to be based on its visuals, and I wasn't necessarily interested in the Monster Hunter-esque post-game of it, so while I enjoyed the quick pace of Granblue, I just wish I could have more. I would really love a DLC campaign. Nevertheless, this was the game that really kicked my year off and inspired me during a time that I needed it, and if my biggest complaint about it is that I wish I could have more, that's not so bad. So before I reveal the next one, I'm going to tell a quick story. I moved to a new house this summer, and when we were unpacking, I found a 3-month Xbox Live Gold card in one of the boxes. I have no idea how old this card is or who it even belonged to, because I didn't even have an Xbox myself until recently, but I decided to redeem it and got 3 months of Game Pass with it. I then challenged myself to play as many Xbox games as I could during that 3-month time period. Psychonauts was one of the 8 games I managed to beat during that time, and it made its way to my top 10 for this year. Now, I had high expectations knowing the cult classic status of this game, but I was still blown away. In the game, you follow Ryse, a talented psychic kid who accidentally stumbles into a psychic summer camp, and because of his profound abilities, is strongly encouraged to train and become a psychonaut, people who use their powers for good. Ryse is voiced by Invader Zim's voice actor Richard Horvitz, which makes him a really enjoyable protagonist to follow. The game has a timeless art style, a huge variety of thematic cinematic levels to explore, fun characters, and a pretty much wholly original plot that subverts a lot of the tropes that you come to expect in most coming-of-age stories. Now, I've played a lot, but Psychonauts is easily one of the best 3D platforming adventures I have ever played. The final stages were brutally difficult in a rewarding way with a memorable finale, and overall, the game has some of the most fun level designs I have ever seen. I'm so excited to play the game's sequel one day, and I feel really lucky that I just got into the series because I don't have to wait for Psychonauts 2. Sorry to you guys that did. And really quick, the footage you see here is from the PlayStation release of this game since I no longer have Game Pass. I'd highly recommend the Xbox version over the PlayStation release if you have the choice, or emulation of course. The Xbox version had some audio glitches at times, but looked way better than the PlayStation release does. Now, I went through a major retro gaming kick this year, and hands down, the best choice I made was finally diving into the classic Mega Man series. I grew up with Legends and Battle Network, so I've always loved him as a character, but I still sort of felt like a poser for not really knowing his classic stuff yet. Well, all of that changed after I picked up the Legacy Collection this year, and I beat Mega Man 1, 2, 3, and a good bit of 4. Out of all of these though, Mega Man 2 was my favorite, it's number 7 on this list, and I now see why so many people like it. To be honest, while I think Super Mario Bros. 3 is probably the best, most perfect NES game of all time, Mega Man 2 is a close second place for me. I actually beat this game 3 times because I liked it so much, and the more I played, the better I got. I found myself using the Legacy Collection's rewind feature substantially less with time, which really made me feel like I was progressing as a player. The music is top notch, of course, the gameplay is fantastic once you get a hold of it, the difficulty is at this sweet spot where it's challenging but fair, especially compared to Mega Man 1, which I thought was just brutal, and I can't stress enough how absolutely pitch perfect Mega Man 2 is all around, from gameplay to sound to graphics. I mean, it's definitely one of the best looking NES games I've ever seen. I was addicted to this game for a time there. To give you an idea of just how much I liked the game, for Christmas I got a perler bead set so that I could get back into the hobby, and the Blue Bomber was the very first thing I made because I'm just that much of a fan now. Mega Man 2 is about as perfect as a video game for video gamers can get. Out of all the games on this list, the story of how 2024's Eve of Calamity graced my YouTube channel is my favorite to tell. Shortly after I put out my Exophobia review, Eve of Calamity's developer Clothscape reached out to me with a review code. I honestly didn't like how the game looked, so I wasn't sure about it based on first impressions, but I gave it a go, and suddenly the hours just melted away as I found myself enthralled in an open-ended adventure that allowed me to do so many things. I ended up beating this game twice before I published my review on it, and after my video dropped and was the first to get over 100,000 views on my channel, suddenly Eve of Calamity went from being a relatively unknown game to getting hundreds of purchases. And I was just so excited to be able to make a difference in the devs' lives and spread awareness about this awesome indie RPG. Even after all of this, it honestly still deserves more attention in my opinion. If you've played it, give it a positive review on Steam, seriously. This is hands down my favorite turn-based RPG that I've played this year, the biggest surprise of the year for me, and for a long time, it was honestly my #1 game of 2024. Eve of Calamity's Alfred is still my favorite gaming character that I met last year. I even made some fan art, as you can see here, and I highly recommend this game to fans of classic JRPGs and CRPGs. Don't judge a book by its cover. You won't be disappointed. And for number 5, we have Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles for the PSP. This is a remake of the original Ys books 1 and 2 on the PC Engine TurboGrafx CD. I wanted to try this version because the pixel art graphics are just stunning, especially on my Vita's OLED screen, and a lot of the OG fans of the original game still recommend this version. Ys Chronicles is 2 games in 1, just like the original, and despite each game having a relatively short runtime, they both do a great job at making you feel like you're on this huge, sprawling adventure with zero fat. You step into the shoes of Adal, 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 the pronunciations are all over the place in the series, in his journey to discover the secrets of the books of Ys, and you help him try his best to rid the island of the invading monsters under the rule of the evil Dark Fact. The further you go, the more you uncover, and the most arcane, evil, disgusting beings of all time will attempt to stop you at all costs. The Ys series is one of the first notable action RPGs out there and features bump combat, where you deal damage by physically colliding with the enemy like a Beyblade. While that may sound weird at first, it's actually really fun, especially once you get stronger and get the hang of how it all works. The few moments of grinding that you may need to do in these games are never a problem because the combat is so fast-paced, and the 10 out of 10 soundtrack keeps you motivated. I played this game while I was on a trip to Peru this year, which I talked about in my Reddit Pick My Vacation Games video, and I'll be honest, while I also brought Astral Chain, Metroid Dread, and Fantasy Life with me, Ys 1 was the one I played the most and ended up beating. It was just perfect for all those long bus rides on that trip, and now that I've also finished up Ys 2, which kept things fresh by introducing an almost shoot-'em-up bullet hell-like style to the gameplay, I am such an Ys fan, and I'm ready to dive further into the series. After I beat both games, I found that they complemented each other really well and told a much bigger story, and this game ended up ranking higher for me than it would have had I just beaten the first one. I have a feeling that will also be the case for Golden Sun once I finish the Lost Age, but yeah, don't sleep on Ys. Number 4 is Alien Isolation. Now, I played more horror games this year than I have in my entire life. This was probably the biggest change in my gaming habits that I made this year. It all started with a full playthrough of Amnesia the Bunker as part of my Xbox Game Pass challenge that I did, and then I played a good bit of Fatal Frame Made in Blackwater and Resident Evil Revelations on the Wii U, but it was Alien Isolation that I was truly blown away by. This game received a miracle port on the Nintendo Switch that runs buttery smooth and looks simply fantastic. It went on sale right around the time that Alien Romulus dropped, so me and Miss Humblemud were on an Alien kick, to say the least. The environmental detail of this game is second to none, as you can see by all these screenshots that I stopped to take. The alien constantly keeps you on edge and feels incredibly smart and alive, and Amanda Ripley definitely earns the reputation of her last name over the course of its adventure. It does wear out its welcome a little by the end, and the start of the game is a little slow since it's meant to feel more like Alien rather than Aliens, but it's a horror tour de force nonetheless that's going to stick with me for ages, and make me a little paranoid whenever I see a big vent. Now, before we get to the top 3, I'd like to run through my 10 honorable mentions really quick, because these games also had a pretty substantial impact on my 2024 experience. And yes, I did say 10. You can view these as pretty safe bets for my top 11 through 20 spots this year, but keep in mind these are in no particular order or ranking. So yeah, really quick, Helldivers 2 is a shining beacon of light in an age of soulless, cash grab, microtransaction heavy multiplayer games, and though I've not played it nearly as much as I'd like to since I'm mostly a single player type of gamer nowadays, I think it's a very special, impressive game that deserves every accolade it gets. I haven't played it in months, so as you can see when I went to get footage for this video that I'm extremely rusty.
You have accomplished liberty.
But I put about 30 hours into it around the time it first came out, and it's certainly one of the most memorable gaming experiences that I've had in 2024. Digimon Survive is a bleak, heartbreaking, horrific game that takes the Digimon franchise to a dark space that it's really never been in before. I honestly consider this game as part of my horror gaming experiences this year because it goes there. It's about 85% visual novel and 15% tactical RPG, and while the tactical RPG side of it unfortunately doesn't quite shine enough really until the end when you're able to do all these crazy things, the story and writing of this game is so good that it carried me through. This isn't going to be a title for everyone, not even all Digimon fans, but I'm glad this game exists and I will always be a Digimon Survive defender from now on. And I also just want to say Agumon is the absolute best in this game, and his bright, naive, and fun demeanor really provides a nice palate cleanser from this sometimes desolate environment that you're in. Sonic Lost World, which I played on the Wii U, rules, and it's a shame that myself and many others didn't recognize that in the past. Yeah, it's not a perfect game. The devs did a horrible job at explaining how all of its mechanics work, and at times, yeah, it feels a little more like a Mario game than a Sonic game, and there are also some weird difficulty spikes, especially considering that this game was marketed specifically to a younger audience, even for Sonic, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't have a great time playing it. I think about this game more often than I ever expected to, probably more than I would ever like to admit, and I still pop in every now and then to replay some of my favorite levels. I understand why it got the hate that it got, but Lost World is now one of my personal favorite Sonic games ever. You just have to take your time to learn it. I share some more in-depth thoughts in my Wii U video if you'd like to see, but yeah, this game is great. Enslaved Odyssey to the West was the first game I ever talked about for my new video game speed dating series that I'm starting up, and I ranked it as a relationship tier game. Well, I'm happy to follow up on that with you guys and say I actually did play Enslaved all the way through, and what a ride it was. This is the first cinematic adventure type game I've ever played, and I think it was a good choice to start with. Its ending is a bit divisive amongst fans, and I understand why. But the polarizing nature the plot of this game has is precisely one of the reasons why it was so interesting to me. It made me think a lot, and I really enjoyed pretty much every aspect of this game from start to finish. Now, to save some time since I know you guys are curious about my top 3, I'm going to group these next 5 games together because I've gotten really far in each of them and intended to beat them all, but just haven't gotten a chance to come back to them yet, unfortunately. Declines Drops, Tales of Ryse, Metroid Dread, Beyond Shadowgate, and Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven are all top tier games in their respective genres, and I still think about them constantly. I've really enjoyed my time with all of these in different ways so far, and if these 5 had been the only games I could have played this year, I'd still say I had a pretty stacked 2024. I know Metroid Dread especially has a reputation that precedes itself, but don't sleep on Declines Drops, Tales of Ryse, Beyond Shadowgate, or Romancing Saga 2 Remake either. These games are fantastic. And my final honorable mention is Code Bunny. This is the last game I beat in 2024 after I had already finalized my top 10 list, so I didn't want to go back and retroactively factor this into my rankings somehow, but it felt wrong to not include it because I had a blast. It's a love letter to all the Mega Man X and 2D Sonic games, and also does a great job of being its own thing at the same time. I'm working on a dedicated review for it soon, so keep a lookout for that. Okay, I've kept you waiting long enough. Let's get to the top 3. Number 3 is Dishonored Definitive Edition. This was another game I beat as part of my Xbox Game Pass challenge, and my god am I happy I did. I knew nothing about this game prior to jumping in other than seeing a few screenshots and knowing that it was a stealth game, but it is so much more than that. This is one of the most dynamic games I've ever played, and you can approach a mission in basically any way that you choose. The world is immersive, the characters are well written, the graphics and art style really hold up, gameplay is flawless, the side stories and world building that come as a result of those side stories unfolding is simply amazing, and I just can't say enough about how much I enjoyed this game. I played Dishonored right after I played Eve of Calamity, and this was probably the most consistent gaming high that I was on all year, just banger back to back. I liked this game so much that after my Game Pass subscription ran out, I got a physical copy of the game for my PlayStation so I can play it fresh again one day and eventually try the DLC missions. You owe it to yourself to play Dishonored. Even if you've never played stealth, I mean, I'm still quite new to the genre to be honest, this is a game I think most people will appreciate the genius of. And for number 2, we have Astrobot. Astrobot was everything I was hoping it would be and more in so many ways. From the moment I sat down and beat Astro's Playroom, I was hoping Sony's little robot would get a full-fledged platformer one day, and we finally got that. I thought that this was just a personal pipe dream of mine, but it really materialized, and I did not see it coming. Though I talked about how I'm not the biggest fan of how Sony chooses to honor its legacy franchises, I have to admit that they've now successfully pulled on my nostalgic heartstrings with that new 30th anniversary boot up. I mean, you can't beat the PS1 boot up sound. And Astrobot itself is a game I have zero issues with. It is impossible to not smile when playing this game. It constantly gives you fresh, new, and exciting ideas. The graphics are breathtaking at pretty much every corner. The music is insanely catchy, and the little robots you save will warm your heart if you've ever been a fan of PlayStation for any length of time. I know 2024 was stacked with great games and would have honestly understood and welcomed any of this year's nominees winning Game of the Year, but I think Astrobot also deserved to win just as much. I'm hoping it proves to the industry that there's still a market for good old-fashioned simple 3D platformer fun, and the mascot doesn't have to be Mario to be successful. To me, Astrobot's success and the wake-up call to the industry that it provided was just as important for platformers as what Baldur's Gate 3 or Elden Ring were for RPGs. For a while there, it felt like AAA studios forgot that the best way to be successful is just to make a good game, and Astrobot is a great game. Okay, and we're finally here. My number 1 spot belongs to Silent Hill 2 Remake. I honestly didn't think I'd play a horror game that would top Alien Isolation for me, as that game is top-notch, but the surreal, psychological, and uncanny valley nature of Silent Hill 2 Remake just edged it out for me. Admittedly, other than watching the 2006 movie and playing a good bit of Shattered Memories on the Wii, which also rocks by the way, I've not interacted that much with Silent Hill. It's a franchise I've always respected, just never got a chance to play. But wow, did Silent Hill 2 open my eyes, or clear the fog I guess, to what a horror game can do. This was probably the fastest 20+ hour playthrough I feel like I've ever done. I was just glued to the TV screen and I had to see what was going to happen next. Running around in Silent Hill itself and searching, going from building to building was still probably my favorite part overall. It was just so immersive, and I really think Bloober Team knocked it out of the park when it comes to making you feel like you're in a very much lived in but now abandoned place. The monsters are horrific and have a lot of significant subtext to their design. The combat I know is a little divisive amongst fans, but to me it was extremely satisfying. The voice acting and mocap is top notch, and I've thought about the world of Silent Hill every single day since I beat this game. And now I want to go back and beat the original Silent Hill 2 on the PS2, as well as the other games, as I'm officially all in on this franchise. This is one of the best stories I think I've ever seen in a game, and I'm glad that Bloober is mostly getting positive feedback from the hardcore Silent Hill fans for making this game as well as they did. It is truly a 10 out of 10 game for me. So there you have it, my top 10 games of the year plus 10 honorable mentions. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if there are any games from this list you'd like to see me produce a more in-depth review on one day, please let me know. And also, let me know what your favorite games of the year were, because I'd really like to see what you all played in 2024. Maybe I'll give it a try. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay humble.